Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Scott and I'm a board member of I Have the Right To. To mark this year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we are releasing the second season of our series of interviews with survivors of sexual assault. The idea for these interviews came from a conversation that I had with Jessie a number of years ago, where she mentioned that she wished there had been a resource for survivors like herself to hear from other survivors about their path of navigating survivorship. And I said, well, wait a minute, why don't we create that ourselves? And so that's what this is. And we're really excited for you to hear from, to learn from all of the incredible survivors that we have spoken to for this second season. Corinne, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, what are some misconceptions that you think people have about survivors of sexual assault, and how can allies work to challenge those ideas?
I think that generally in maybe the circles I'm in, there's maybe a misconception that survivors of sexual assault are weak. I think in popular culture today, there was kind of trigger warnings were on the rise, and I think that that was a really great thing to help survivors so that they're aware that whatever media they're engaging with, that they could get triggered by it. um, and I think that those are a good thing to have in place just personally. But then I think that they've kind of been downtrending a little bit and made fun of a little bit in popular culture. So that always kind of makes me feel maybe a little heated, because I'm like, no, those are in place for good reason. And I think that there's a connotation that, oh, if you need a trigger warning, you're, weaker or something. So that's definitely a misconception too. I think, yeah. And then just more broadly, I think that when people come forward to share their stories, um, I think that maybe an audience is thinking that a survivor story is speaking to broader culture all the time and always making these broad strokes and big connections to the system that we're living in. But sometimes a survivor's story can just be their own. And I think that that's the point of coming forward to share your story, and everybody coming forward to share their stories, just to show and highlight the diversity in cases of sexual assault and stuff. So that's kind of very micro. I think trigger warnings and stuff are a good thing. And I think that we should be cognizant of the society we're in, and the fact that people can get triggered because of their experiences, and it's not a sign of weakness. But I also think that when people are brave enough to come forward, yeah, I think that their unique experiences, they don't always need the pressure on them to speaking to a larger system all of the time.
Sure, definitely. And you speak about the bravery of deciding to talk about your own story. How did you kind of get to a position where you felt comfortable doing that? And what was that like? How did you sort of arrive at that point? And what has your experience been like since you have shared your story?
Yeah, I think I'm very privileged in that, kind of right when my assault happened and I heard about my university's Title IX process. Well, I had heard about the Title IX process before my assault happened, but then the assault happened and I knew that it was a resource there available to me. Kind of immediately when I got my bearings, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do something about this. I want justice, whatever that meant to me at the time. Um, and I think there's a lot of privilege in that. I think that that shows that I was in a relatively safe environment. I think it shows that I had support around me. Um, yeah, just the fact that I felt safe enough to take action is just really highlighting my privilege and my positionality. Um, So it didn't take too long for me to come forward. I think it took like a month or so until I, decided to move forward with the Title IX case. Um, yeah, but I think a lot of it, like my journey was, especially at the beginning, was like, I want justice. And I like couldn't even define what justice was. I didn't really even know why I was doing it. It just felt like, oh, it's what you do when there's an injustice like thrust upon you. It's just like, this is the next step to take. Um, but then I like very quickly started to realize that like, oh, a Title IX case is not necessarily like in our country broadly, in the institutions in it, like it's a criminal legal system, not a criminal justice system. Like justice is not really shown a lot of the time. And I very quickly started to realize that in the process. I mean, I was told my case would be complete within 60 days and instead took 7 months. I was guaranteed like a university appointed advisor to like help me through that. That never happened. There were just so many shortfalls. And I think that I learned like very quickly that just justice wasn't my main goal anymore. And I didn't really know. I kind of started feeling lost in that process. Um, but yeah, it didn't really take too long for me to take action. But then when I started taking action, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a lifelong decision to keep showing up every day for myself, to keep growing, to keep, just like moving forward with this thing that happened to me.
You mentioned feeling lost at
Mm-hmm.
times during that process. What kinds of support or resources do you believe are most critical for survivors in those moments of their journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like known that the first response you get when you come forward as a survivor is often the most impactful and informs the trajectory of where you take, um, any action after what happened to you. And the first responses I got were really great. My friends were extremely supportive. So I think first and foremost, having friends around you or family, whomever who are just validating and reassuring, um, are great. And like sexual assault is a crime of power, so whatever resources are available to you or that you seek out, I would hope that they are centering your power and like, yeah, just through every aspect of how that can come to fruition. I think like that varies. um yeah, I think just having people around you who are validating and like always centering your power are really great. But in terms of like resources, um I think it's important to not have or like when resources grow, they tend to like mimic other systems that are in place within like our capitalistic society. So I think that it's really important for um, organizations that are helping like marginalized groups and like victims of crimes that are brought perpetrated in the society we're living in, for those organizations to not mimic those that are very present in capitalism. So I think a lot of that comes with like a non-hierarchical structure to whatever sense that can realistically like exist in and manifest in. But just like I think when we're actively trying or our organizations are actively trying to not mimic the system that is doing the oppressing, then that inherently creates a safer space for people to like be themselves. Like the last thing I would have wanted when I came forward was for there to be like a super rigid system that I was like, being vulnerable within. I think that would have put my guards up even faster. Like even in when I came forward in my Title IX case, the Title IX I guess, entity within my university tried to paint it as very like, we're here for you, even though you're like seeking justice through us. Like we can be a resource for you. Um, I didn't really take well to that. It felt very like performative, and there was no teeth or backing to like their statements of support. And I think that's because they're existing within this institution that is like for profit and like just constantly like um, you know not doing things like not putting their money where their mouth is. Um, and so when I came in contact with I Have the Right To, it felt extremely safe. It felt like I was listened to from the jump, and the work that they're doing, um, you know, is combating the system that we're living in. So that felt very safe to me. It felt like, oh, I greatly align. Nothing can really be outside of the system within global capitalism, but I think that the work that we're doing is combating it. And I think that that allows for, a safer space for people.
You mentioned I Have the Right To. What role do you think education and awareness play in preventing sexual assault and supporting survivors? Of course, with I Have the Right To being a driving force in that movement.
Yeah, I think that knowledge is power. That's like something that really kind of kept me going after my Title IX case. I'm like, what I did gain from this was knowledge of the system, of, the institution, and of how I can take action moving forward and show up for myself. And what I now know is that I wish I had that knowledge beforehand. And I have the right to choosing to graciously give that knowledge to people, to kids, is incredible. I think that if I would have had that as a kid, I just would have been more prepared for what was in store for me. And yeah, less like taken aback and just more empowered throughout my process of coming forward as a survivor. What role does education play? I think when we are educating children like fundamentally about consent and like healthy relationships and yeah, just like what feels right and wrong to them, I think that is extremely powerful. You're teaching kids to choose things for themselves. And I think that that is like liberation. I think that, yeah, like students, especially just knowing the beast that they're up against, like our system, like rape culture, is just really empowering. Yeah, so I think that education plays an extremely strong role in preventing sexual assault and supporting survivors, because like we're not taught from a young age to feel empowered, to have strong opinions about our wants and our needs. So when we're educating kids about their wants and their needs and what feels safe to them, they can flourish and grow. And I think that in that way, like education can be liberation. Like in our society, we're always taught to have black and white answers too. And I think that a lot of times when we give students and kids tools to express themselves, they find that there's so much nuance, like there's so much freedom in the world, and like freedom in how they can express themselves, freedom in what they can become. And yeah, like when I have had my experience through I Have the Right To, talking to students, you can tell that like when you share your story, it makes them feel safe to share their stories in whatever like way that falls, just like really just expressing themselves. And I think that when we are distilling education in some way, we are like storytelling. And I think that, yeah, just like giving students tools to like be able to express themselves is really, really important. Because then that's like how we start shifting culture. It's how we start changing like hearts and minds and educating about the broader system. And then when we start doing that, it's just like a domino effect. Like more and more people feel like they can be vulnerable. More and more people show like the nuance that exists within this topic, and it shows more and more how it intersects with other topics. And I think that that's really important. It's how we make change on a larger scale. So I think education is really fundamental, and I have the right to choosing to use their resources in that way, I think is filling an extremely large gap.
Totally. I think a lot of times too, growing up, especially as a girl, you're kind of trained, maybe not intentionally, but through sort of backdoor channels that, oh, you're not supposed to create, I don't want to say drama, but you're not supposed to, create some sort of like stir per se, or like, oh no, don't, just be good, just be quiet. You know what I mean? Like there's such a different, like I think that you're still trained that in so many ways. And so it is super important, I think, to kind of break through that barrier.
For sure. I think that storytelling is something I'm really passionate about. And I think that for so long, like women and like BIPOC queer people have been, socialized to fit in these boxes. And through sharing our stories, we prove that we don't fit in boxes. And yeah, just like bring it back to survivors specifically, when survivors are allowed to speak, allowed to feel vulnerable, to share their experiences, and like they are inherently, number one, speaking to the larger system of oppression, and then number two, like I think being long-winded and not staying on point and talking about the diversity within experiences is pretty like radical, and just like taking up space is really important, and just not something we're taught to do. So yeah, just like I have the right to, giving kids the opportunity to take up space is just, it's so important. It's something I wish I would have had as a kid. I think it would have just given me practice about like sharing my story when it came time for me to do that after I was assaulted. Like that was a new thing for me. I had never just shared my experience. I mean, it's even making me uncomfortable right now, but like teaching people to be comfortable in their experiences and their skin, I think is just really, really, really invaluable.
Does I have the right to give you hope for the future, would you say? And if so, how?
Oh, for sure. It was the Georgetown Day School Summit was like participating in that through I Have the Right To was truly the first time that I felt like there is going to be much more positive than negative that came from my experience. And that was the first moment I felt that. But then ever since then, I just felt like, oh, it's, of course, growth isn't linear, but like it's going to go up from here. It gives me so much hope. They, are truly an organization I wish I would have had before I got assaulted and before I decided to come forward. I also think they give me hope for more than just survivors, because like issues aren't like in a vacuum. So I think that issues related to sexual assault intersect with so many other things, of course, including the patriarchy. And I think that the comprehensive nature of what I Have the Right To is doing, like not only giving survivors resources, but educating on consent and healthy relationships, programming through their aspirational masculinity work. All of these things are debunking the patriarchy, debunking stigma around sexual assault, and um, yeah, it's really giving people freedom to learn and to grow. And I think the ripple effect we're already seeing, but I can't wait to see how like the impact of this organization um, continues to like change hearts and minds and allows people to grow.
What advice would you offer to someone as a survivor who is struggling to come forward and maybe seek help in the aftermath of sexual assault?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that um, I would encourage any survivor to ask for help, because asking for help is the first step in reclaiming what happened to you. And like, you deserve to be able to work through this. You deserve to find peace and happiness and love. And through asking for help, you can find that. Um, Unfortunately, I think that a lot of healing has to come from like you showing up for yourself and you deciding to like put one foot in front of the other. And it feels really daunting and like putting in a ton of work. And it's truly like the most difficult thing I've done for myself. Um, but like choosing to show up for yourself and reclaim what happened to you is how you move forward, and can start to like rewrite the narrative and take ownership of what happened to you. Um, and yeah, after coming forward, I never really thought about like what would happen if I didn't come forward. Um, and I think that's just because like I would never go back to that. Um, it didn't take super long between when I was assaulted and when I chose to come forward, but I do remember like that time period of mulling over it and stuff and not knowing what to do. I think like after I decided to ask for help, I was like, oh, there can't be any going back from this. Like, um, and there's a lot of privilege in saying that. A lot of people can't come forward necessarily, for an infinite amount of reasons. Like they might not be safe in doing that. But if you can ask for help, I would really encourage you to do that. And then, yeah, like through the help that you get, eventually you can like learn a lot and grow from it. Um, yeah, I'm definitely better off after asking for help. I now have like resources and systems in place that inform and like protect my peace in the world, and that have helped me move through and navigate the world, after this really complex thing that like stripped a lot of power from me. Um, yeah, asking for help is like how I now feel empowered, and it's very uncomfortable. But yeah, I would encourage you to do it, if you at all are on the fence about it.